I guess the question here is sort of who has the agency. So you might say, for instance, we don't want our algorithms to be racist. And facial recognition, some people have criticized facial recognition systems as being racist because they're not as good on darker skin and lighter skin. Okay, but the agency there, the actual facial recognition algorithm isn't what has the agency. It's not the racist thing, right? It's the I don't know, the combination of the training data and the cameras being used, whatever. But my understanding of, and I would say I agree with Benjio there that I think there are these value issues with our use of algorithms. But my understanding of what Russell's argument is more that the algorithm, the machine itself has the agency. It's the thing that's making the decisions, and it's the thing that has what we would call values.
Yes.
So whether that's just a matter of degree, it's hard to say, right? But I would say that's sort of qualitatively different than a face recognition neural network.
And to broadly linger on that point, if you look at Elon Musk or Stuart Russell or Bostrom, people who are worried about existential risks of AI, however far into the future, the argument goes is it eventually happens. We don't know how far, but it eventually happens. Do you share any of those concerns? And what kind of concerns in general do you have about it?
So I would just the fact of them worrying. Just the fact of them worrying. And the title of the article was written by the New York Times editors. I wouldn't have called it that.
We shouldn't be scared that superintelligent.
No.
If you wrote it, it'd be like, we should redefine what you mean by superintelligence.
I actually said something like superintelligence is not is not a sort of coherent idea. But that's not like the New York Times would put in.
And the follow-up argument that Yoshio makes, also not argument but the statement, and I've heard him say it before, and I think I agree. He kind of has a very friendly way of phrasing it. It's good for a lot of people to believe different things.
He's such a nice guy.
Yeah, well, no, it's also practically speaking, like, we shouldn't be, like, while your article stands, like, Stuart Russell does amazing work, Boston does amazing work, you do amazing work, and even when you disagree about the definition of superintelligence or the usefulness of even the term, it's still useful to have people that, like, use that term, right, and then argue.
Sure. I absolutely agree with Benjio there, and I think it's great that, and it's great that the New York Times will Benjio there, and I think it's great that, and it's great that the New York Times will publish all this stuff.
It's an exciting time to be here. What do you think is a super fun topic of complexity that you have worked on, written about? Let me ask the basic question, what is complexity?
So complexity is another one of those terms, like intelligence. It's perhaps overused, but my book about complexity was about this wide area of complex systems, and then try and understand those elements, and then try and build up an understanding. And this whole students and postdocs, sometimes we'll see too, and that's a 4-week, very intensive residential program where you go and listen to lectures and you do projects, and people really like that. I mean, it's a lot of fun. They also have some specialty summer schools. There's one on computational social science. There's one on how could we make this as idealized as possible but still retain really the important things we want to study. And that's really kept, been a core theme of my research, I think. And I continue to try and do that. And it's really very much kind of physics inspired. Hofstadter was a PhD in physics. That was his background.
Like first principles kind of thinking, like you reduce to the most fundamental aspect of the problem.
Yeah.
So that you can the most fundamental aspect of the problem.
Yeah.
So that you can focus on solving that fundamental aspect.
Yeah, and in AI, that was people used to work in these micro worlds, right? In these micro worlds, right? Like the blocks world was very early.
I think it's called
Metacat.
Metacat, and there's a Python out the product, the service being advertised. This show presented by Cash App, the #1 finance app in the App Store. I personally use Cash App to send money to friends, but you can also use it to buy, sell, and deposit Bitcoin in just seconds. Cash App also has a new investing feature. You can buy fractions of a stock, say $1 worth, no matter what the stock price is. Brokerage services are provided by Cash App Investing, a subsidiary of Square and member SIPC. I'm excited to be working with Cash App to support one of my favorite organizations called FIRST, best known for their FIRST robotics and Lego competitions. They educate and inspire hundreds of thousands of students from over 110 countries and have a perfect rating at Charity Navigator, which means the donated money is used for maximum investment.
And you had to wait, I don't know, 5 cycle times. If you have an instruction in one position on the drum, then it would be ready to read the data for that instruction. 3 notches. The drum is 50 cycles around, and you go 3 cycles, and you get the data, and then you go another 3 cycles and get to your next instruction. If the instruction is there, otherwise you spin it till you get to the input. And we had no random access memory whatsoever until my senior year. My senior year, we got 50 words of random access memory, which were priceless. We would move stuff up to the random access memory in 60-word chunks, and then we would store it again. So if 17 want to go up there.
Could you have predicted the future 60 years later of computing from then?
In fact, the hardest question I was ever asked was, what could I have predicted? Now, the interviewer asked me, she said, what about computing has surprised you? And immediately I rattled off a couple of other things, and then she said, okay, so what didn't surprise you? And I tried for 5 minutes to think of something that I would have predicted, and I couldn't. But let me say that this machine, I didn't know. Well, there wasn't much else in the world at that time. The 650 was the first machine that there were more than 1,000 of it. And before that, there was each machine there might be a half a dozen examples, maybe.
The first mass market, mass produced.
It was the first one that was done in quality, and IBM didn't sell them; they rented them, but they rented them to universities at great had a great deal, and so that's why a lot of students learned about computers at that time.
So you refer to people, including yourself, who gravitate toward a kind of computational thinking as geeks. At least I've heard you use that terminology.
It's true that I think there's something that happened to me as I was growing up that made my brain structured in a certain way that resonates with computers.
So there's this space of people, 2% of the population, you empirically estimate.
That's been
Proven?
Fairly constant over most of my career. However, it might be different now because kids have different experiences when they're young.
So what does the world look like to a geek? What is this aspect of thinking that is unique to
that makes
a geek?
This is a hugely important question. In the 50s, IBM noticed that there were geeks and non-geeks, and so they tried to hire geeks, and they put out ads with papers saying, if you play chess, come to Madison Avenue for an interview or something like that. So we're trying for something. So what is it that I find easy and other people harder? And I think there's more and more about
seems to move closer to natural language type of description of programming.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you see those two as conflicting, as the formalism of theory and the idea of literate programming?
So there we are in a non-uniform system. I don't think one size fits all, and I don't think all truth lies in one kind of expertise. So somehow, in a way, you say my life is a convex combination of English and mathematics.
And you're okay with that?
And not only that, I
thrive in it.
I wish, I want my kids to be that way. I want, etc. Left brain, right brain at the same time. Get a lot more done. That was part of the bargain.
And I've heard that you didn't really read for pleasure until into your 30s. And literature.
That's true. You know more about me than I do, but I'll try to be consistent with what you do.
Yeah, no, just believe me. Just go with whatever story I tell you. It'll be easier that way. The conversation.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true.
So I've heard mention of Philip Roth's American Pastoral, which I love as a book. I don't know if it was mentioned as something I think that was meaningful to you as well. In either case, what literary books had a lasting impact on you? What literature?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. So I met Roth.
Oh, really?
Well, we both got Taki and Fleming to put the concept
or the read
brain structure that makes it hard for them to write, or it might be some brain structure that makes it hard for them to write, or it might be something just that they haven't had enough practice. I'm not the right one to judge, but I don't think you teach any person any particular skill.
Construct algorithms. So it's another way to construct algorithms, really.
Yes. You have to know some basic concepts of what is a program, what is an algorithm, and it also talks about a mode.
I like that one. So
this algorithm that you think of first thing, and interesting subtle algorithm that is not so obvious for the right compilers. And I was asked